I'd like to ask another keynote speech from Professor Kaveh Madani. He's the director of the UNU Institute for Water, Environment and Health. So you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this opportunity and the invitation. I also want to thank all the organizers, permanent missions of Egypt, Indonesia, Japan, Republic of Korea, Netherlands, Slovenia, and Tajikistan, Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism of the Government of Japan, high-level experts and leaders panel on water and disasters, HELP, and National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies of Japan, and UN Center for Regional Development, UNCRD, and UNDESA. It's always good to talk about the problems the world is facing, especially when it comes to water. As Professor Hiroki said, the spectrum of glaciers to the oceans is very diverse. He talked about distance and he talked about elevation, but that spectrum is also full of very, very diverse stories, problems that are very different in nature. And when they're different and the formulations are different, their solutions are also different. And it's very, very hard to come up with one narrative that explains all these problems. At the two sides of the spectrum, we have the glaciers and oceans that we talk about, maybe more nowadays, fortunately, knowing that the oceans attract 90% of the excess heat produced by the greenhouse gas emissions, and then also the glaciers support $4 trillion of GDP. So we know the importance of these, but in between we also have a lot of things going on and a lot of problems that are very diverse, and they're not limited to those nations which have both oceans and are exposed to oceans and glaciers, but also the states that they don't have those. And the problems are not limited to the global south. We are, now in a country that, just over the past few days, a lot of people have died because of floods, including a lot of children. And that has happened in one of the richest states of the United States. So the problem is not even a problem of the global south. The problem that we face is indeed that there is a political economy problem, and there are some solutions that are very hard to implement because we need to deal with a lot of trade-offs between employment, food production, environment, and so on. And as we heard from our colleagues, it's not only the problem of water quantity, but also the problem of quality. As we go forward, the problems happen further and further. His Excellency, Mr. Kaveh, mentioned the RLC problem multiple times, and the lessons we have learned from this big problem that maybe started with goodwill, and then lots of on into the consequences that have gone through across borders and across generations, and have affected a lot of people in the region and will continue to affect a lot of people. And the problem didn't even stop there. Indeed, the RLC syndrome has affected a lot of other lakes and wetlands around the world. We have seen the same problem in the salt lakes in the United States, Lake Urumia, Iran, Dead Sea in the Middle East, and a lot of other systems that have seen and experienced the same problem because we have formulated our economy or set up our institutions in a way that they never appreciate the essential value of water. With the trade wars, with UN processes being undermined by many nations, with more nations losing trust and faith in the system, actually, it becomes harder and harder to bring people together to address those problems. Yet on the positive side, we have science. We heard from our colleague about what we can do today through satellites and the unprecedented computational capacity that we have today. AI and data help us tell story, help us compute very fast and tell story. And this provides and equips us with an unprecedented capacity that we didn't have before. Still, the water story is very much undertold and underappreciated. And I think that's something that this community can change. We can change the level of attention to this problem. And guess what? I think the Global South is in it with us because they understand and appreciate the value of water, the value of 70% of the world's water that is in the hands of farmers, mainly poor, mainly subsistent farmers who not only mainly are essentially need to feed themselves, but also have the burden of feeding the whole world, and the exports from the Global South are never appreciated. There are justice implications. There are pollution problems and so on. And the stories are diverse, but when it comes to storytelling, the inclusivity matter is lost. We cannot come up with stories that capture the whole complexity and spectrum of the problem. Yet with satellites and data, we can tell stories. Yes, the Global South, many regions don't have the computational capacity to do the computations, but today we have the models in place to do those computations and to provide stories. And if there is a missile launch somewhere in the world tomorrow, the stories you see would tell us exactly where the coordinates of that missile launch or the launchers were. But if floods and droughts and fires and other disasters are happening, I don't think we are that eager to tell those stories. And that's what this community can change, because all of us know and appreciate the value of water. And another thing I think which is important between now and the UN Water Conference is putting more efforts into not only connecting us to the Rio Conventions. I mean, I think that's something that we try very hard to say, that water is related to the Rio Conventions and the topics that all those three conventions are focused on. But I think we can tell the world that water is the way to break the deadlock that we are facing in implementing something useful for those conventions. And the water stories and the water solutions are very unique and very much needed. Another important thing is that water is being presented most of the times as the sector that is the victim of climate change and where we need to make adaptation efforts. That's true, adaptation is necessary, but water is also a very invaluable mitigation sector where anything you do for the water sector would help the Rio Conventions, would help us help the fight against climate change, against biodiversity loss, pollution, desertification, and so on. So water indeed is the place that the world should invest in, and I think that should be one of the things that we communicate properly to the world, that this is a sector that can create unity, can create trust and peace, if we appreciate this diversity that we have. At the United Nations University, we work with all those communities that have a voice or want to have the voice. On one side, we have the member states and the policymakers, and on the other side, we have the smart academics that have a lot of solutions to provide. And we try to use the UN university platform to facilitate that exchange, and I invite you to work with us in accomplishing that mission. I want to also take this opportunity to thank the government of Japan for supporting the United Nations University for 50 years, actually, to accomplish this important mission. We just launched, earlier this year, the Global Media Academy, And last week in Indonesia, we inaugurated the Secretariat of the Asia Pacific region of the Global Media Academy to work with the broadcasters and the scientists, and, help them work side by side to tell new stories that can change the way communities, public, and governments think about water and tell the story of water. We've also, later this year, we would be launching the Global Environmental Intelligence Platform, which would be complementary to the efforts that we just heard about to essentially use these models that we have and a lot of satellites that we have up in the skies and the data they have produced to help and empower many nations, including the Global South nations, to understand their problems and also help the rest of the world understand those problems that seem unsolvable. And hopefully we change the bias of the narratives that we have right now, that are many of them are global north oriented, and that's why a lot of nations of the Global South cannot be part of the force and come forward with us because their problems and the nature of their problems is different. At the end of the day, it's good that we are all in it together and we have a shared mission through cooperation, through better exchanges, and through, I would say, kind of being more critical to who we are and what we do and how we can help. I think we can do much better and better and ensure that the 2+2 in our community is greater than 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for